Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's December 10th. Today we celebrate the birthday of a beloved American who, in her lifetime, was known more as a gardener than a poet. We'll also learn about the gift from Japan that resulted in the Plant Quarantine Act in the United States. We'll remember the botanist knighted for his incredible scientific services to the British Empire. And we'll hear a poem about King Midas and his garden. We'll grow that garden library with a book that reminds us of the importance of beauty in our garden harvest. And then we'll wrap things up with the story of the botanist known as Mad Ridley. And it turns out he wasn't mad at all. Now, before we get started, I just want to take a second to invite you to head on over to the website for the show. You'll find it at thedailygardener.org. All one word, thedailygardener.org. And once you're there, if you look over on the left-hand side, you'll see a pretty little graphic. It's got pink roses on it, and you'll see an invitation. It'll say, join the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. And all you need to do is click on that and then sign up. And every Friday, you will get an exclusive email from me, and it will have a personal update from me. Usually I include pictures of my own garden or something in my house that is garden related. And then I also include garden reminders for you. All of the books that are featured in the Grow That Garden library for the week are featured, as well as garden inspired recipes, gifts, tips, and hacks. And these Friday emails are only available if you subscribe to the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. Plus, every single week, one subscriber wins a book from the Grow That Garden library bookshelf. So make sure to head on over to the website and sign up for the free Friday newsletter today. All right, today's curated news comes from the English Garden. It was a piece that was written by Greg Loades, and the title of it is called The Story of the Conference Pear. Well, that caught my attention. Now, this article was written 3 years ago, so it's an oldie but goodie. And the conference pear is a dessert pear, and it's grown in many British gardens. And long story short, this pear got its name from a conference. It was a pear conference that was held in 1885. And that conference was followed by an apple and pear conference in 1888. And the net result of those conferences was the creation of the conference pear. Now, the story of this pear is totally fascinating. It really did end up saving the British pear industry from total collapse. Anyway, if you would like to read this article in detail for yourself, all you need to do is head on over to the listener community for the show. It's in the free Facebook group called the Daily Gardener Community. So you don't need to take notes or hunt this thing down. The next time you're on Facebook, all you need to do is search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. Here's today's brevities. Today is the birthday of Emily Dickinson, who was born on this day, December 10th, 1830. The Dickinson author Judith Farr reminds us that during her lifetime, Emily Dickinson was known more widely as a gardener than as a poet. Emily grew up gardening. She would help her mother with their large edible and ornamental garden. And the flower garden became Emily's responsibility when she got older. She planted in a carefree cottage garden style. After Emily died, her sister Lavinia took over the garden. Emily's niece and editor, Martha Dickinson Bianchi, recalls, all Lavinia's flowers did as they liked, tyrannized over her, hopped out of their own beds and into each other's beds, were never reproved or removed as long as they bloomed. For a live flower to Aunt Lavinia was more than any dead horticultural principle. Well, ain't that a fact? And it was on this day, December 10th, in 1909, that 2,000 cherry trees arrived in Seattle from Japan. When the First Lady, Helen Taft, indicated that she wanted to beautify Potomac Park, the mayor of Tokyo donated 2,000 cherry trees for the project. But once the trees arrived on this day in 1909, they were found to have pest issues and disease. And it was this delivery of trees that led to plant quarantine legislation for America. So if you've ever wondered about the laws that govern bringing plants into the country, well, that legislation is rooted in this bad batch of cherry trees, which the USDA ordered to be burned. Now, you can imagine Japan's mortification over that first lot of trees. Well, in response, Japanese horticulturists immediately started cultivating and fumigating a new lot of cherry trees. It took 3 years to grow the trees and get them ready for travel. But finally, in 1912, Tokyo's mayor Yukio Ozaki rectified the matter from 1909 threefold when he sent 6,000 trees to the United States. By this time, Charles Marlett's Plant Quarantine Act of 1912 was in place to ensure that all plant material entering the country was healthy and sanctioned. And this larger batch of trees was split between New York and Washington, D.C. And today is the anniversary of the death of the Victorian British botanist, explorer, president of the Royal Society, and director of the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, Sir Joseph Dalton Hooker, who died at the age of 94 on this day, December 10th, in 1911. Joseph accomplished much during his long life. The botanic gardens of the world were a discovery and classification network that Joseph masterfully orchestrated. To Joseph, the botanic gardens were essentially botanical laboratories on a mission to enhance the world's economy and promote trade. And Joseph was Charles Darwin's closest friend and collaborator. In fact, they corresponded about Darwin's theory before it was made public. And Joseph was instrumental in getting Darwin's work published. And many regard Joseph as Darwin's PR man. Joseph was brilliant and concise. It was Joseph Dalton Hooker who once famously wrote, "Life is short and books are long." In 1877, Joseph was knighted for scientific services to the British Empire. And here's an adorable factoid about Joseph. Kew Gardens shared that during his travels, Joseph would send letters to his young son with the salutation, "My dear little lion," or "My dear cub." Isn't that sweet? In unearthed words, today is the birthday of an American poet of the Pacific Northwest, Carolyn Kaiser, who was born on this day, December 10th, in 1925. Carolyn occasionally wrote about the garden, and my favorite garden poem by Carolyn is this charming piece about King Midas growing golden roses called The Ungrateful Garden. Here are some definitions to help you understand Carolyn's poem. An ague is a shivering fever. Serried means standing in a row. To silt up is to block or fill with silt. And a shift is a nightgown. To keep the show clean, I've eliminated all offensive language. Here's The Ungrateful Garden by Carolyn Kaiser. Midas watched the golden crust that formed over his steaming sores. hugged his agues, loved his lust, but cursed the out of doors. Where blazing motes of sun impaled the serried roses metal bright. Those famous flowers, Midas wailed, have scorched my retina with light. This gift, he'd thought, would gild his joys, silt up the waters of his grief. His lawns a wilderness of noise, the heavy clang of leaf on leaf. Within, the golden cup is good to lift, to sip the yellow mead. Outside, in summer's rage, the rude gold thorn has made his fingers bleed. I strolled my halls in golden shift, as ruddy as a lion's meat. Then I rushed out to share my gift, and golden stubble cut my feet. Dazzled with wounds, he limped away to climb into his golden bed. Roses, roses can betray. Nature is evil, Midas said. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Growing Beautiful Food by Matthew Benson. This book came out in 2015, and the subtitle is A Gardener's Guide to Cultivating Extraordinary Vegetables and Fruit. Let me just start by saying I love Matthew's book because he's not only a gardener, but also a garden photographer. And Matthew's garden was designed with a photographer's eye, and his Stonegate Farm property in Balmville, New York, is one of the most beautiful places I've seen displayed in a garden book. And for anyone wondering why beauty matters, just ask your kids how appearance influences what they will and won't eat. Well, Matthew knows firsthand that beauty inspires behavior and behavior change. If our harvest is visually appealing, we will eat better and be healthier. Matthew's Gentleman's Farm is on 1 small acre of land, and he also operates a CSA offering vegetables, orchard fruit, cut flowers, herbs, eggs, and honey. Matthew uses his expertise in growing and selling 50 garden crops for inspiration and instruction in his book. This book is 264 pages of beauty, from the garden to the harvest. Matthew shows us how to grow delicious and alluring food. You can get a copy of Growing Beautiful Food by Matthew Benson and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $10. It's such a good book, and it means that I'm totally recommending this book for your Secret Santa gift this year. So don't forget about it. Growing Beautiful Food by Matthew Benson. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Today is the birthday of the English botanist, geologist, and naturalist Henry Nicholas Ridley, who was born on this day, December 10th, in 1855. As the first director of the Singapore Botanic Garden, Henry arrived in Singapore in 1888. Henry has been described as the rubber tree's Johnny Appleseed because he single-handedly pioneered Malaya's rubber industry. Not only did Henry plant and encourage the planting of trees, but he also figured out ingenious ways to tap the tree's latex without harming the tree. Henry's exuberance for persuading Malayan farmers to grow rubber trees led to an unfortunate nickname, Mad Ridley. Well, without Henry, rubber wouldn't have become a viable cash crop alternative when the Malayan coffee crops succumbed to disease. At one point, the requests for Henry seeds were pouring in at a rate of 1 million seeds a day. Henry not only provided the seed for farmers, courtesy of the Botanic Garden, but he lived to see the rubber trade market begin to transform Malaya. By 1920, Malaya produced over half the world's rubber, and rubber remains an essential crop for the region today. And to think that it all started with rubber seed that Henry collected from just 22 plants. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Wyoming, Minnesota with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, Kiana Rayleigh, Maddie Doyle, Natalie Decker, and Eric Begay. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media. You can follow the show on Instagram, and listeners always have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. All the stories and books that are featured on the show can be found over at thedailygardener.org, thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. Last but not least, you can share your own gardener greetings on the show by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.